Okay, so this is our last episode for this unit, our last discussion on early river valley civilizations. Today we're going to look at ancient China and how it came to be. I'm going to work on my Chinese. Bear with me, I'm not very good, but make sure you're in your interactive notebook and you're following along. All right, so we're on page 8 of your interactive notebook, the very last page. China, let's talk about its geography. Just like we have same themes here that we've looked at in the last couple of videos, we're going to look at their geography, we're going to look at some of their technological advancements, some of their environmental challenges, and so forth. So China has oceans to its west, east, has oceans on the side. Sorry, guys. Mountains and desert. So they're pretty much isolated from the rest of the world. They've got great natural barriers. Again, like we have said prior, that can be a blessing and it can be also demise for them. So we have the Yellow River in the north, or the Huanghe. Again, bear with me with my Chinese. And then they had the Yangtze in the south. Those two rivers are going to set up that fertile plain, just like we've seen in the other civilizations. The Huanghe leaves what's called loess, which is a fertile silt when it's flooded. So that's what's going to make that plain so fertile and so great for this early river valley civilization. The North China Plain, basically the area between the two rivers, was pretty much the center of civilization for the ancient Chinese because it's just so awesome, so great. They love it there. Environmental challenges, what's kind of putting against us. So the Huanghe floods could devour whole villages, just like we talked about with Egypt and the Indus River Valley, a blessing and a disguise with, or a blessing and a demise with these floods. Too little rain or too little flooding is going to cause massive starvation. Too much, oh man, it could take, like it says, it could wipe out an entire civilization. They actually go on to nickname this river China's Sorrow because it just became so devastating. Again, like we talked about with the other civilizations, because they are basically isolated by their geography, it means a lack of trade, and that's going to cause some problems for them. They're going to have to be a little bit creative with things. So they're going to have to be self-sufficient. They might have to find ways to trade with other societies in a little bit more interesting details. China's natural boundaries, although they seem great, they didn't always necessarily protect them, which isn't awesome. So we'll see that sometimes they are invaded and it's not quite the protection that they wanted. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the dynasties that start to pop up. We're not going to talk about all of ancient China because there's a lot of stuff to cover. We're just going to hit some of the highlights. So by 2000 BCE, we see some of the first cities pop up. One of the biggest ones that pops up with one of the first dynasties is going to come from the ruler Yu. He is the first ruler of the Xia dynasty. He creates a flood control system, which is great. He tries to tame that river. He's going to tame the Yellow River. Again, the Yellow River is the same as the Huanghe. And so he's going to tame it so that settlements can grow. They aren't going to literally be washed away. So that's very smart of him. The Shang dynasty comes next. It emerges at, around 1700. BCE and lasts about till 1027 BCE. It's the first to leave us written records. It also is one of the ones that built these elaborate palaces and tombs. We see the terracotta soldiers come from this time period. They build cities of wood. And we see through evidence that the upper class lived in the cities and the poor people or the lower class are living on the outskirts or the outsides of the cities. We also see that they develop massive walls for military defense. The Great Wall of China was built for defense. Again, we said those natural boundaries are awesome, but they didn't always keep out our invaders. So that's one of the biggest reasons for why the Great Wall of China was actually built. Some of the Chinese culture. We see China sees itself as the center of the universe, the center of the world. They really felt that anybody else that was out there, which they knew there were more people out there, they saw them as uncivilized, as barbarians. We're number one. We're awesome. China rules. That's how they felt. They also felt it's very important in the Chinese culture. Family was super important. They felt that that was central to their social institution. There's very, very high respect for their parents, the elderly, family in general. Elder males or the older males are going to control all family property. Males are going to be the ones who are the dominant in the families. Women are expected to follow the males, even their sons. So women are at the bottom of the barrel. This is something that is different from the other civilizations we've talked about. You know, the other ones we talked about how females had some of the same rights. Women in the Chinese culture are at the bottom. Again, they are subservient. They obey the male. And then we also see in the Chinese culture this idea of spirits and dead ancestors playing a role. We saw this a little bit with the Egyptians, with the life after death and the afterlife. But the Chinese culture really felt that their dead ancestors still played an active role in their current life. They could bring good fortune or they could bring disaster to a family. This is evident if you've ever seen the film Mulan. Like, shout out to there. Mulan was all about that. You know, she's going on. She wants to prove honor to her family, you know, make the spirits happy. So Mulan does a great job of doing that. I know they just released a new, like, live action one. I haven't seen it yet. But I would definitely check that out. They do a nice job with that. And Mulan actually is based off of there's a poem called The Ballad of Mulan, which is like loosely based off of a real person, like very, very loosely based off of. So like I said, definitely check that out. Lastly, they created a writing system, and they used symbols to represent syllables, not necessarily ideas. There's a lot of characters for it, and the system is very difficult to learn. They had kind of like dialects for different areas. If you kind of got the basis of it, you could communicate with other people, but it is very challenging for people to understand. So we have lastly the Zhou dynasty, which comes out in 1027. So after the Shang dynasty falls, the Zhou dynasty comes into play. They basically overthrow the Shang dynasty and they take control of China. And they do it with a very interesting take. Basically, the Zhou dynasty comes in. They claimed that the Shang king had been really bad. And because he was so bad, the gods told them that they should take away his power. So they're going to take away the Shang's rule, and the gods are going to give the power to the Zhou dynasty. And this sets up what becomes known as the Mandate of Heaven. And the Mandate of Heaven is basically a just ruler. So a ruler that is good and just and does the right thing is going to have divine approval. So it has approval of the gods. This basically becomes the central view to Chinese government in ancient China. It sets up the dynastic cycle, and it shows that if there are damaging events, that might be signs that those ancient spirits are not so happy with the king's rule, and maybe it's time for the Mandate of Heaven to kick in, and we pass it to another family. The dynastic cycle is basically their way of explaining the rise, the decline, and or the replacement of different dynasties throughout ancient China. Last thing we want to talk about is technology and trade in the ancient Chinese world. The Zhou dynasty is credited with creating roads and canals. They help to create or improve transportation, which also helps stimulate trade and agriculture. Again, because that was great for them because they were geographically isolated. If they aren't going to be self-sufficient, they're going to have to find it elsewhere. So this is one way that helped them out. We see that they used coins to make trade. On the right-hand side are examples of two ancient coins. They produced cast iron tools and weapons. And they also, with those cast iron tools and weapons, that's going to help make farm work easier and more productive. And it's also going to help with farm production. More food, more people, the cities thrive, culture keeps going. So again, we've been talking about ancient China. We've looked at the two rivers that converge to create that fertile plain and create their early river valley civilization. And again, this is our last civilization in this unit. Thanks for watching, and we will start off with a new unit next time. So make sure you tune in.